Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for being here at Build with us. I know that we're probably the last session before everybody goes to lunch, so we'll make it worth your while. My name is Byron Tardif. I'm a Principal Program Manager with Azure App Service, and with me I have Jordan. And we're going to be walking through, if you haven't been paying attention to App Service over the last couple of years, hopefully some cool stuff that is going to blow your mind. And then some of the fundamental stuff that we just, we want to have in an app that is ready for production, et cetera. So without further ado, we're going to be talking about a bunch of stuff, including the new sidecars feature, the new PV4, availability zones, et cetera. So if you're looking for app service stuff, this is the right session to be. If not, hopefully I'll change your mind and you're going to come host your apps with us. So really quickly, the list of announcements is long. So we have premium v4 instances that give you better performance at a lower price point. So everybody wants that. We have the new support for .NET Aspire in preview. This is beginning of the journey. It's going to take us a while, and we're going to be working on some platform features that should benefit every app, whether it's Aspire or not. But the idea is to get to a point where you can just deploy your Aspire apps to App Service and be happy about it. If you want to learn more about that, I will be doing a demo session tomorrow. I believe it's at 11, something like that. But look it up, find my name, you're going to find it. You heard us do the presentation about SRE Agent. So this is the site reliability engineer that is able to look at your app and then take action based on the health. So it's like having somebody on PagerDuty that's going to go and find the issue when you're running out of memory or need to scale out and you haven't set up autoscale, et cetera. There's a bunch of .NET and Java and, in general, migration tooling to help you move those apps that are still sitting on-premise, get them in the cloud, and get all the benefit of PaaS. So all of those things are in preview. General availability, this is what Jordan's going to be showing. It's all around how do we get availability zones for your app today. Like if you need to be running with 4 nines, you want to be looking at availability zones, so that's the story. And then you can see there's a bunch of different breakouts. So we are in BRK 200. There's also 201. Some of the demos that I'll be doing, especially around AI, we have some labs. You can do those here in Build, but you can also do them on demand. So if you don't get into one of those labs and you want to play with some of the samples that I'm going to show, that's the resources you want to find. There's a blog post up there. If I remember correctly, that's the blog post that goes over all of the stuff that we're announcing for App Service at Build. So if you want to take a picture, that's the AKMS link on the top. OK, so App Service Premium v4. So the way to think about this is every time that there's a new generation of compute, there's a new bump in the perf that you're going to get. And this is affected by not only the CPU, but you need to think about the memory, the disks, the motherboards. Everything is going to be faster. And that also means that we can also bring the price point down. So specifically, if you're hosting today apps on, I forget what it is, Premium v2, Standard, go start looking at Premium v4. You're going to get more bang for your buck. I think it's better for everybody if you start looking at moving your workloads into Premium v4. Specifically on Windows, it's going to be about 24% cheaper. So that's a meaningful saving. And the other special thing about Premium is that they're eligible for RI and saving plans. So if you're already consuming a bunch of app service, you can go do reserve instances and say, hey, I know that I'm using, 10,000 hours a year or 100,000 hours a year, and buy that commitment with a lower price. And then you can use Premium v4 at an even lower price. Savings plans, same idea. You can, if you know how much you're consuming, you can get a lower discount and get it lower than retail. So that's the other thing. Like standard, basic, those are not applicable for those things. OK, so now let's jump into one of the demos. The first thing I'm going to be talking about is one of these new features that we introduced, which is sidecars. Sidecars, specifically, if you're familiar with App Service Windows, we had this concept of site extensions, where you could run third-party code or code that you write alongside your app. And we didn't have that feature in App Service Linux. So sidecar extensions is that. It's letting you, because everything in App Service Linux ends up being a container underneath the covers. The natural pattern is to use a sidecar. So if you're not familiar with a sidecar is just another container that is running next to your main container and is sharing some of the networking and app namespaces, so you can have that container-to-container communication, and it's all running on the same compute. So if you want to do something without having to get too complicated with networking, or you want to add some functionality, you can package it into a container and run it alongside your app. And this works for both code, if you're doing right-click from VS deploy to app service, or if you're running containers. So both of them, regardless of what you're using to deploy your app, have access to this feature. And this is just an example. One of the things that you can do is you can deploy your random container, just point it to the container registry, add whatever environment variables you need to share between both of them. Or we also, oops, sorry, went forward. And we also have a bunch of pre-built containers that are already, we know they work. We basically put together these samples, and you can run them next to your app with literally just, I want to run this, click, go. And that's what I'm going to show you. The next one is, this is the specific architecture of the app that I'm going to be demoing. And we have the ability to run, oh, this is moving forward by itself. OK, so we have the ability to run small language models as a sidecar with your application. So raise your hands. How many of you have been asked to do something with AI recently? Everybody, right? So how many of you know what is the return on investment on your AI investments? Nobody, right? So the best way to start, and I tell this to everybody. I don't know what's going on with this. I tell this to everybody is, actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to stop getting distracted. Let's go over here. The best way to start here is start with something that's going to cost you $0, right? And that is hosting a small language model next to your app on the compute that you're already using. So let's look at the demo. So this is a very simple app. All it does is it has a catalog of clothes that I can wear, and I can ask it a question. Like, for example, this is a red, slim fit, checked casual shirt, and how would you style it? And you can see really fast. It starts streaming pretty much instantly, and I get the results. And this is all happening within the app. So no complicated network settings. It's just literally talking on localhost. So let's take a look at that. OK. So here's my app. If you look at it, whoops. OK, nothing's working today. You can hopefully see that this is running on PV4. And I just have this here to remind myself that it's the V4 is available both on the regular SKUs and the memory-intensive SKUs. So the whole menu of sizes is available for you. I'm running this on, on a P3 MV4 because I created this demo when there was only one region and only a couple of stamps available. So you don't need to be running on something this big. And the next thing I'm going to show you is how do you add this sidecar. So I went to Deployment Center, where I configure what code or what container I'm deploying to my app. And now there's this new tab called Containers. And like you hear me say earlier, you can either point it to a custom container. So this is something that you containerize yourself, and you're hosting it in Docker Hub, Azure Container Registry. It's completely custom to whatever you are doing. Or I can go back, and I can say, add a sidecar. And this is our little curated list. So the things that you're seeing here is we have 5.4, 5.3.5, 5.3. We have Redis, and we have Datadog. So these are the samples that we put together. If you want to see the code that makes this demo work, you can select it, and you can click on the Quick Start. And that'll take you to our blog, and there's instructions, all of the code, everything that you want to do with it. We also added this little reference on the left that collects all of the AI-related demos, blogs, samples that we have. So that's your hub to go look at how to do all of this cool stuff with App Service. And also, right next to it is sidecars, because sidecars are not just AI. You can get a bunch of really cool, useful demos here. What else are we doing in this space? So in the next couple of months, one of the things that we want to do is there's a lot of commonality between models. So we want to make it easy for you to bring your own model. So right now, you select Phi, Phi3, Phi4, but there's a bunch of different models that can run on CPU. There's also BitNet. We have a demo and a blog post about it. That's another one that we want to bring in here. And open to suggestions. If you have ideas of other stuff, let us know. Then the next question is, okay, great. So I have a sidecar that I added. So how do I know if it's working, if it's not working, et cetera? So you have access to logs, and you can check the status and all that good stuff. And this is another really cool thing. Because this is containerized, your app could be written in .NET, and your sidecar could be written in Python. And that's basically what I showed you, right? That initial view, I think it was Blazor app with a ASP.NET API backend. And then the actual container that is hosting the SLM, it has some Python wrapping it. The other really cool thing that we've done with these samples is they are drop-in replacements that you can go and use Azure OpenAI once you've grown up and you've demonstrated that there's actually value to the AI integration that you're doing with your app. So this is all because we're using the Azure SDK for OpenAI. I always get that mixed up, so that might not be the exact name. But it makes it very easy for you to transition going from code running against an SLM, running locally, to now you've grown up, you actually demonstrated that there's value to this AI scenario, and you're actually going to be spending some money. The other thing that I see people do is not every scenario needs to call out into one of the big models, right? There's a lot of stuff that you can get away when you start looking at being multi-model. So that's another pattern that we see people do, right? There's some simple scenarios that a small model can take care of them. Like I think specifically, if you're doing math and arithmetic stuff, Phi is really good at that. And you can save a ton of money, as opposed to, yes, I want to summarize or generate, a sales pitch with like a bunch of multi-step reasoning, blah, blah, blah. Yes, go to one of those bigger models. So, okay, how is this working? So if you can see right here, this is calling on localhost. So that's another key thing. Sidecars, whatever you choose to host in your sidecar is only available on localhost to your code. So you don't have to worry about somebody else calling into this or taking advantage of or punning your app. Only available on localhost through your code. And then how is the actual flow happening? So this should be very, very simple, right? So all I have is, where did I go? All I have is a dictionary where I'm saving the context that I want to pass over to the app, right? So this is the item the person selected. This is the message that they're sending out or the prompt that they're providing. And then this is just an async, call into the completions API, get the response, stream it back, and display it in the UI. So that's the full circle, right? So we have the item, we have the prompt, we send it, and then we get the reply back. So obviously, this is not hardened for production, right? There's still a couple of things that you might want to do. Validate the inputs, make sure that they're not asking you to generate a picture of Hitler or stuff like that. Generate the outputs, make sure that there's no profanity coming out of your model, et cetera, et cetera. But you get the building blocks and the chaining that could get put together to make this happen. Cool. Let's switch over to the other one. OK. So like I said, one of the key scenarios around containers is giving us that availability to extend your app. And for years, people have been asking us, what's an easy way to attach an APM to my app? And there's Datadog, there's New Relic, there's Dynatrace. We have blogs that cover those scenarios for all of those different APMs. So if you want to, if you're not using Datadog, which is what I'm going to demo here, you can still do it. Datadog is the first one that we have in the curated list, where it's literally just click, click, and I've added it to my app. And we're working with the partners to bring all of those experiences up to par and in the curated list. So again, another app. This is very simple. It's just a catalog where I can select things. I can see the data about it, e-commerce site, yada, yada, yada. The next thing is you can see, again, I'm choosing to use PV4. And the way I added this is, again, I just have the Datadog sidecar. So one of the things that I want to show you is, once you've gone through the flow of adding the sidecar extension and you choose the one that you want to do, in this case Datadog, you see that the pattern's there where you have the quick start where it tells you exactly what you need to do. If you want to follow at home, you can do it. Once I've gone through that and added it, I can go click back. And then this is as if it was a custom extension, right? So from that point forward, we're just giving you the nicety of not having to know all of the different fields that you need to add and all of the different endpoints. So it's very maintainable. You can, if you want to choose, if you don't like the specific image or version of Datadog that we're using, you can go and point to a different one, et cetera. So we did this, and then the last part is, I'm not going to do a demo about Datadog. If you're using Datadog, you know what it looks like. But the key thing is you can see that there's metrics flowing. So all the things that you would expect to see with your app are there. And you can also kind of go and look for the DevShop app is the one that I've been using and I've been demoing. So you can filter based on your services. And what ends up happening is you have multiple apps. They all end up talking to one instance of Datadog, and you want to be able to filter and slice the data based on the app that you're interested in. And what did I have to do to do this, right? So there's two parts. One is there's some data that you're going to be getting out of the box just by enabling the sidecar. But if you're a Datadog user today, you would probably go and instrument your code and add a couple of references for the stuff that you care about. But the fact that you can get data out of the box just by enabling the sidecar, I think that's a great step forward. OK. So I think that wraps it up for this. Let me go back to the PowerPoint, see if that's working today. OK, so we showed Phi. We showed the sidecars. I'll leave this up again just for a minute. So again, the idea here with the sidecars is you should have the flexibility of bringing your own custom code, but also the ease of use of, it's moving again, the ease of use of grabbing those examples and starting to add value to your app. One of the common themes, and it literally doesn't go a day where I don't have somebody asking me this, is do I need to rewrite my application to start taking advantage of AI? Do I need to start from scratch, grab everything, migrate it, go 100% serverless, cloud native, yada, yada, yada? And we on AppService, we believe the answer to that is no. You saw me go and, by using some of the features that we have in the platform, add AI functionality to an existing app without touching the code base, right? It's very minimal. You add maybe 1 or 2 lines here and there, and you can start taking advantage of that. Something else that we announced recently is another feature parity thing where we've got web jobs to GA on AppService Linux. If you haven't heard about web jobs let you, so usually when you have an app, everything happens based on HTTP request, right? If your app is sitting there, nobody's calling it, your code is doing nothing. It's just waiting for a request. Web jobs let you run background processes on your application. So what are some examples of background processes? You could be aggregating logs, or you could be clearing tables on a database, or you could be generating an email that gets sent once a month, that type of jobs. The other interesting scenario, and again, we've all been asked to add AI to everything, but I'm tired of seeing chat-based applications, is you've all seen on a retail websites where they have that AI-generated summary of customer reviews. So the web job is actually a great way for you to add that to your app. The web job can be inline, or you can basically drop a message into a queue whenever a new review gets added, and then you can schedule a task that basically summarizes that collection of reviews and then send it back to your application. And that can be done locally on the web app that you're already running with the code that you already have. The beauty of this is that it's completely asynchronous, right? So it's not something that you're being prompted to do or generate when the customer is running. So you can schedule the task to run once a day, et cetera, adds value. Really interesting pattern. And you can get started with web jobs and a local SLM, and you can grow up to a big model once you've proven and added value to your application. OK, I think that wraps it up for me. And now we're going to welcome Jordan back, and he's going to talk to you about availability zones and a bunch of other cool stuff.
All right. Yeah, thank you, Byron, and thank you all for joining us today. The first thing I'm going to go over today is just another one of those agent integrations with App Service. This is another one of those where I'm going to show you with pretty much minimal code changes rather than some just cosmetic updates. We can integrate an agent into one of our apps. So let's get right into that. We're going to be using the Azure Foundry agent service, and that was recently rebranded yesterday, so this slide didn't get that update. It's hard to keep up with all these name changes, but it's called the agent service. And I'm going to show you how quickly and easily you can integrate that into an existing app service. And this is important because you may have apps running on app service already, and you want to keep up with the demand and make sure your apps are staying relevant, and you want to add agents. And with this process, you'll be easily able to do that. So I want to get right into the demo. Of course. My machine locked? OK, there we go. So quick shout out, if you haven't seen our docs recently, we now have a section there for all of our AI integrations. And this is just going to keep growing as we release more and more tutorials. So if you haven't participated in our lab yesterday or are not signed up for our one tomorrow, get on the standby list, or you can go into our docs and work through what I'm going to be showing you today. So specifically, what I'm going to be showing is this Fashion Store Assistant app. It's similar to one of the ones that Byron just showed you a couple minutes ago. Basically, I started with an app that just had basic shopping cart and inventory functionality, and I wanted to add an agent to it. And me, I'm not really a .NET developer. I'm not really a developer at all. So I want to do this with little to no code changes, little to no hands-on coding. So I use GitHub Copilot for everything here. So the first thing I asked Copilot to do was create the chat interface for me. So starting with just the basic shopping app with the inventory and cart, it was able to add a new tab for the assistant, and it was able to add this chat interface. And don't worry about the text in there. We'll get to that in a little bit. That's where the agent functionality comes in. So once Copilot was able to add that new user interface, it was then time to create the agent. And what you're seeing here is the Azure AI Foundry. This is the agent project. And you can see I have an existing agent here, and this is what's currently integrated in my demo app. But just to show you how easy it is to create a new agent, you just click a button. And as you can see, I have a new agent created. And it's already using one of the existing deployments, which I set up a couple hours ago, the GPT-4o mini model. So this is a very small model. It's not very smart. But for the purpose of this demo, it's going to give us exactly what we need. So great. I have an agent right now. This can easily be integrated into my app because I have my agent ID. I have the connection string available. And I can just go ahead, share the documentation, share some code samples with GitHub Copilot and VS Code, and get this added. But I did want to take this one step further because the agent service has a special feature. I'm going to go to my pre-created agent and show you exactly what I'm talking about. If we go down under Actions, and we'll click and add an action, you'll see we have the OpenAPI 3.0 specified tool. Now, what this allows us to do is provide the agent with our API specification for our app, And then on our behalf, the agent will be able to interact directly with our app with 0 code changes and 0 code updates. So basically, all I have to do here to get this agent to be fully working with my app is create this agent and create this OpenAPI 3.0 specified tool. So I've done that already. I'm going to show you what that looks like here for the existing one. We give it a name. We give it a description, so we just tell this tool what it's going to be used for. And because this is an online fashion store, which has simple shopping cart and inventory functionality, we're telling it that's what it can do. And then we provide the agent with the API specification. In this case, I do not have any authentication on my APIs, so I left the authentication as anonymous. But if you did have additional security requirements, you can add that here as needed. And then all you have to do is copy and paste in your API specification. So one thing you can see is the URL of our already running app service. This is so it knows how to form those API requests to that app. And then as you scroll down through this, which I'm not going to go through completely, but you can see we have the different operations, such as checking the cart, adding and removing items from the cart. And then if you keep going, you'll see some inventory operations, such as checking inventory, checking what's in stock for this app. All right, so with that, I'm just going to move over to VS Code. One thing I did want to call out, though, is if you do not have an API specification for your app, you can actually just ask Copilot to do that for you. So I have an example of that in the chat right here, and it was able to spit out this nicely formatted API specification with just a couple updates. I can get this added to my agent and get this working. But I already did that, so the next step after creating the agent was to integrate it. And again, me not really being a great developer, I wanted to let Copilot do all of this for me. I went ahead and asked Copilot to do that. And all it did was create this agent service, which connects to our agent using the agent ID and the connection string. And then most of this file is actually just formatting the response and making it look good in the app itself. The real important part is just scrolling through quickly. We're creating a thread. And then as we get a little farther down, this is basically where we're just sending the message to the agent and then streaming the response. So again, there's SDKs available for all this, so it's straightforward. And the way I did this was I just told the agent, here's the documentation, here's what you need, do it for me. And after a little bit of trial and error, honestly, it just took me like an hour or two to build this demo, which is very surprising in how simple it was. I was able to get this great app running. So we'll take a look at App Service and see what that looks like. So in App Service, it's just a very simple standard web app. If we go to environment variables, this is where you'll see where I'm passing in the agent ID and the connection string for our agent. And then if we look at the identity, this is what's used to connect the app to the agent and allow it to access it. So the agent is locked down. Only this app can access it. And if you wanted additional security on your agent, the agent service has all the tools you need there. A little out of scope for the demo today, but it's all there in their documentation. So with that quick demo of the app, this is actually a scenario that I went through a couple months ago. I was buying a jacket online. There was no size chart available for me on the website, so I reached out using the chat functionality for this website. After a couple minutes, I was connected to a live agent, and then after a little bit back and forth and some research by the agent, they were able to tell me what size I needed. So 10, 15 minutes of work, I've been able to move into this app with an AI agent in just a couple minutes. So for example, I already have it typed in here because I can't type live. I have a 36-inch chest. What size jacket should I get? And within a couple seconds, the agent should be able to tell me what it recommends. And this answer is being provided just because it has access to the general GPT-4o model, like just general knowledge that it has. So it's saying I should wear a medium. And great. So I want to add that to my cart. I want to work directly in the interface here. I can say, great, add one to my cart. And because the agent has access to the API spec, it knows to use the operation to add the jacket to the cart, and that's exactly what it did. You can see we have one item in our cart now, and here it is. All right, so just to reiterate, that's the end of this part of the demo, but just want to show you how quickly and easily you can add an agent to your apps. All right, skip that. Okay, so for the next part of the demo, we are going to talk about availability zones. So if you haven't seen our blogs recently, as of the other day, we announced some new capabilities with availability zones. If you're not familiar with what availability zones are, I'm going to give you a quick 30-second overview. So across Azure, there's 60 plus or so regions. In each of those regions, there's data centers. Some of them are configured in a way where those data centers are interconnected and form what we call an availability zone. So what that looks like in a sample region where there's 3 data centers, this is what normal operations look like. If you have the availability zone feature enabled, we distribute your workload across the data centers, and everything is running just fine. In the event of one of these data centers going out, which could happen for a number of reasons, if you have this availability zone feature enabled, your workload is still running on 2 of the other 3 data centers in that region, so you will not suffer any outages, and you'll stay up and running. I do want to mention, though, that if you do not have availability zones enabled and the entire region goes down, you're a bit out of luck. So availability zones exist only within the context of the region you deploy your app to. So if all 3 data centers go down in a region, then you should look towards multi-region deployment, which is a different feature that is out of scope for today's talk, but that's where you replicate your workload in a completely separate region in the event of an entire region outage. So with that, on App Service, availability zones are supported on all of our premium and isolated SKUs. This includes our new premium v4 SKUs, so we're making this available everywhere. It's completely managed by the platform, which means you just tell us if you want it enabled, and we handle the rest. We handle the number of zones you're placed on, as well as the balancing of all the instances for your apps. So it's simple, set it and forget it. And then before today, this was a feature that had to be enabled when you created your app service plans. It couldn't be changed. So if you ever wanted to enable it or disable it once your app was created, you had to redeploy everything, which was a big hassle for some people. And then it also required 3 instances and 3 healthy zones in a region. So this is going to become important in a minute. But say, for example, we're in a region, one of those zones is unhealthy, leaving us with only 2 zones. We had to restrict all deployments to that region because we were only able to deploy across 3 zones. So with that, we're going to I'm excited to announce some new features available. The first being that we've now enabled 2-zone availability zones. So if you're familiar with AKS or VMs, they've already had these features, so now we're also implementing them for you all to use on App Service. This is important because in those restricted regions, we're now opening up zone redundant deployments. And this also means that we're lowering the instance requirement from 3 instances to 2. And this is important because we've lowered the cost of entry, basically. So if you didn't actually require 3 instances, but wanted to enable availability zones, you had to use 3 instances. There was no way around that. We've lowered that to 2 instances, so basically a 33% price cut to start using this feature. The next announcement, which we actually made last year, but just wanted to reiterate it because it's in scope for the announcements we're making today, is that we now have a dedicated SLA for apps with availability zones. And this is applicable to apps deployed on 2 or 3 availability zones. So once you enable this feature, no matter what you're placed on, we're guaranteeing those 4 nines of availability. And then lastly, and this is one that many of our customers have been asking for a long time, we've made the zone redundant property mutable. So this can be turned on or off at any time during the life of your apps. In most cases, you'd be wanting to turn this on your existing app service plans. I don't really know why you'd want to turn it off other than potentially scaling down to a single instance, which is now possible. So first, you would just disable the feature, scale all the way down to a single instance. So in times where you don't need that resiliency, you don't need all the instances that you may be using, you can go all the way down to a single instance and save some money. So excited about these new features and how they can help you with your apps. So with that, just want to do a couple demos. I'm going to take you into the Azure portal. This is a preview version of the portal, so you won't see these features just yet. Our deployments didn't align with build, so unfortunately we have a couple more weeks until this will become publicly available. But if you check the docs and some of the blog posts we released that Byron shared earlier, you'll see that this is currently fully available in the CLI and via ARM and Bicep. But if we show you what the portal looks like right now, you'll see a new checkbox here for zone redundancy. So it's become as simple as a checkbox. And this will be available on any app service plans where zone redundancy is available. And how do you know if zone redundancy is available? We have this new property called maximum available zones. This tells you how many zones your app service plan is deployed on. So this can either be 1, 2, or 3 at this time. If the number is 2 or 3, that means you're on the footprint that supports zones and can enable or disable zone redundancy. And if you're on 1, then unfortunately you have to redeploy or wait until we retrofit your stamp with zones, which is happening over the course of the next few years, but there's no ETAs that we can share about that. And then one other point to call out here is the active instance count. You can see it's 2. Zone redundancy is still enabled even with 2 instances. So we're just showing you that this feature is now live. And then another announcement with availability zones is we're displaying the physical zone for each of your instances. So we have a new column in the instances tab for one of your apps. This just, if you need to validate that you're deployed across multiple zones, we're now giving you that without having to go through the support process or opening a support ticket and waiting a long time. You may also see for some of your apps that even if you don't have zone redundancy enabled, your apps will be spread across multiple zones. And this is because behind the scenes, we're working to make your workloads as resilient as possible. So where possible, we've been enabling zone redundancy behind the scenes without even you telling us. And this has no impact to the performance of your apps. It just makes our platform more resilient. So when the portal is open, go check this out and see if you're already using zone redundancy. All right. So with that, I want to get into the final section of today's presentation. I'm going to do a little bit of live Copilot work. I want to use Copilot to improve one of my existing apps. I want to get it deployed on App Service. Just going to add some context here. I'm going to try to pretend like I don't really know much about App Service or Azure. I want Copilot to do all the work for me. And in the interest of time, I've pre-done a lot of this work just because you've seen people prompting Copilot live many times. So I'm just going to run a couple prompts and see what that looks like. Here's a reference architecture of what we're going to be building today. This is something I took off of the App Service docs. It's widely available. It's a multi-region app behind Front Door, so this just follows some of our security best practices as well as our recommendations for fault tolerance. And here's some of the tools we're going to be using. I'll go into each of these in the demo. All right, so first thing I'm going to show you is just, I'm starting with a very simple Python app. I already have it running on localhost, which I can show you what that looks like. Go here. Again, I can't type live, so I already pre-typed a lot of these in. So just saying welcome to build, say hello, have a great time at build. So very simple app. I can show you it's working. And now let's go back to VS Code. All right, so I wanted to get this app deployed on Azure. I wanted it to follow all the best practices. I didn't want to touch the code myself because I wasn't really familiar with bicep templates and all that. So I asked Copilot to do that for me. So you can see the prompt up here. I said, create an AZD template. And if you're not familiar with AZD templates, it's a very easy way of packaging your source code as well as all your infrastructure templates into a simple, easy package that can be deployed to Azure. And GitHub Copilot has been trained to know how to use these and create these. So I asked it to create one for me. And you can see it created a number of files here that are required for an AZD template. So great, that's what I had. This is potentially ready to go if I wanted to just deploy a simple app to App Service, but I wanted to take it one step further. I wanted to add best practices. I wanted to follow what the product group recommends for an app on App Service. So me not really knowing much, I just went ahead and asked Copilot, what are the best practices? How do I incorporate these into my app? And it went ahead and gave me a very organized list of everything I would need to improve my app. And for example, if I wanted to improve the networking and security aspects of my app, I can just tell Copilot to do that for me. So I already have the text written here. And within a couple seconds, you'll see Copilot update this bicep template with what it recommends for networking and security. So let's see what it did. It set a min-TLS version. It disabled FTPS. And it also added some access restrictions. So these are all definitely things that we would recommend you have in your apps if you wanted to make sure you were following all those best practices for networking and security. There's definitely more. I'm using agent mode, as you can see down here. I'm also using GPT 4.1, which is not that great of a model for this. It's just pretty fast, and I wanted to be able to run this prompt quickly. But you can definitely use some other models to improve the recommendations and make your app even more aligned with the best practices. And in the interest of time, I've already done that. So you can see Over here, this is just a more complete bicep template. You can see in my infrastructure folder, I have all these different bicep files for the different components that are required. And this itself is the bicep template that I would need for that reference architecture that I shared earlier. One other thing that I didn't mention before is I'm using the GitHub Copilot for Azure VS Code extension. And if you haven't installed this already, I highly recommend it, because without even me asking, you can see my first prompt up here, without even me telling it to follow best practices, the agent knew to follow those. And I could show you here some of the tools that are available. And you can see here's the best practices. And on your own time, go through this and learn about everything that this is available. But highly recommend you get this installed and let this run in the background while you're using GitHub Copilot and VS Code. OK, great. So yeah, so this template is fully built out. I asked it a little later on. I'm not going to go through all my chat here, but you can see this was done for real. I asked it, how do I deploy a multi-region app? Because again, I don't really know how to do this. And eventually it told me, put it behind front door, deploy to paired regions, East US and West US. And I was like, great, implement that for me. And it did all that. Here's some of the examples. All right. So it did all that for me, and I eventually had a bicep template that was aligned with all the best practices. And just to take you into Azure to see what that looks like, it was able to create all these resources in this resource group for me. You can see I have apps in East US and West US. I have front door. I have NSGs, virtual networks for each of my apps, auto-scale rules, deployment slots, everything that I would need to align with the best practices for deploying to app service. So if we go into one of these apps, let's take the one in East US. Just want to validate that it's set up networking properly. And when you use front door in front of your app service apps, you should really block all traffic directly to your apps and make sure all traffic goes through your front door. So the way you would do that, one way of doing that is using access restrictions. And you can see here that all traffic is denied except for Azure Front Door. So that means if I tried to navigate directly to the app itself, I should get a 403 like that. So great, so it set up the app, exactly what I needed. And then just to close this out, just want to go over to front door to show you that that's also properly configured. If we go to our origin groups, we can see that we have an app deployed in East US and West US, and traffic is being sent evenly to each of these. You could also tell Copilot that you want a primary and secondary region, which is one of the more, which is another strategy you can use if you're trying to lower costs and just direct traffic only to one of your apps. That can be easily configured by Copilot or right here in the portal. So that means if we navigate to front door, as you can see by my endpoint up here, I have the app running again, and we're all deployed on Azure. All right, so Byron, I'll hand it back to you to close this out.
Thank you, Jordan. So we're back on the slides. Yeah, so sorry, one thing I forgot to say is I talked about sanitizing inputs and outputs when you're talking to an LLM. One of the ways to do that is there's the Microsoft SDK for ethical AI. I'm blanking out on the name, but if you look for it, you'll find it. Yeah, so then these are all the things that we want you to look at. A couple key takeaways. If you're interested in Aspire, come to the demo tomorrow. It's going to be in theater. I think it's right there, DM548. So if you want to take a picture, you want to see more of me, that's where you get it. Then the lab 347, there's 2 instances of it. One of them is today. The other one is on Thursday. If you don't get into the lab, you can also do it on demand. So there's a bunch of, I think there's like 5 or 6 different exercises in that lab. And we're going to be building some of the stuff that you saw me demo, like the app that is using the Pi sidecar, et cetera. Where do you find us if you need to find us after build? So first of all, we're going to be in the booth. So I think I have a booth duty tomorrow in the afternoon, and then the team is here. We're rotating through. You can find us on Twitter. We're at AZ App Service. This is actually the product team running that Twitter account. It's not marketing, so you're getting real deal there. This thing just keeps moving on me. yeah, a bunch of links. If you want to take a picture of this, I'll try to keep it on the screen. But then other than that, we're ready for questions. Oh, sorry, one more thing. So the thing that Jordan was demoing, availability zones, keep in mind there's no added cost. So if you're already running on 2 or more instances, there's no reason why you shouldn't have availability zones turned on. If you're running on Premium V2, Premium V3, start looking at PV4. Just, we all want to save money. It's better if you're running on those SKUs. So start looking at that. OK, I think that wraps it up. Oh, sorry, one more question that I always get. Availability zone and ACES. What's the story there?
Yeah, so we're actually really excited to announce that the pricing model for availability zones and ACES has been updated. If you were using ACES and you had fewer than 18 cores, there was this wacky charge to recoup some of the infrastructure costs behind the scenes. We've actually eliminated that, and now you're only charged for the instances you're using. So we're aligning the pricing model with the multi-tenant service.
Awesome. So yeah, we're ready for questions. Over here, I think we want you to use the mic so that people online can.
So, hi.
Hi.
Mo. Throughout build since yesterday, I see almost every demo I've seen has been in VS Code, and with Copilot. Is it because you have some sort of data that says VS Code is overly used than Visual Studio? Or is it just because it's simpler to demo across platforms?
I think the reality is a lot of these features exist in both sides. So there's GitHub Copilot for VS, et cetera. When you're logging around a laptop, for me, my personal preference is code is lighter weight. And if I have to be running on this laptop, I have to be running like Docker containers plus Teams to show my thing plus VS plus da, 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 da. I'm using VS Code. On my desktop at home, or when I'm using my dev box, which is like the virtual dev box that you can get on Azure, I'm using VS. And I think it just comes down to preference and what you're comfortable doing. And I go back and forth all the time. Any other questions? Oh, thank you so much for coming. And like I said, if you're not ready to ask a question here, come find us at the booth. We're going to be there all day.